Hello, I'm doing another one of these. This time let's talk about dynamic poses. So first things first, knowing what your character is doing is important. If all you've decided is that your character is just standing, you might want to decide on a specific action or emotion for them to convey so that you actually have something to aim for and aren't just moving limbs around aimlessly. Even if it's as simple as a character having most of their weight on one leg, just having some kind of pose rather than them just standing directly facing the viewer can look a lot more interesting. And the reason this looks a lot more interesting is down to these angles you've now introduced, and arguably one of the most important things in posing, line of action. I would say it's the most important thing. I don't know what else it could be. If you haven't heard of it before, the idea of line of action is that every pose can be boiled down to a line, or there might be a couple different lines that can describe the same pose. And theoretically, if this line is interesting, your pose will probably also be interesting. Most of the time this line will span down the character's spine and follow a leg, but it might follow like an arm or both arms. It's definitely not an exact science, so this is a situation where you kind of just have to feel it out, and practice definitely makes progress. An exercise that is good for this is just getting a bunch of reference pictures. A site that is really good for this is just one called Line of Action, link in the description. And yeah, the idea is just on each of these poses, just trying to locate the line of action of them. So wow, you have a line. So now what? Well, the aim after you have this line is to make it so every limb kind of complements this line somehow. Whether you're inventing the pose and you're placing the limbs yourself, or if you're just tweaking an existing pose to give it like a stronger sense of motion. That might be by following the line's direction, or you can also complement the line of action by opposing it. Yeah, I actually find that sometimes the key to making a pose look very action-filled is through these limbs that kind of oppose the line of action. Again, because it's not an exact science, it's kind of hard to give any concrete advice. But one thing I can always say helps is drawing loose and fast. Some things that could help with this is by maybe gripping your drawing implement further back. Try not resting your elbow on the table when you draw. If you can, standing up also can help. And also drawing with tools you're more comfortable using. Like, for example, I often draw digitally, but I find it a little more comfortable to sketch on paper with a pencil, so yeah, use whatever you feel most like loose and comfortable in. So to really elevate your pose drawing skills, doing gesture drawing practice is really important. And yeah, so gesture drawing is just where you try and quickly capture the broad strokes of a pose, not paying any attention to clothes or facial features or musculature, just laying out the line of action, and then you add on head, ribcage, hips, arms, and legs. The hands and feet can be simplified to just show what's important or distinct about them. And yeah, the idea is to just do this very quickly, and what can help with that is actually setting yourself a timer. Pretty commonly it'll be a minute or 30 seconds, which could sound a little stressful, but if it helps with the stress, just remember it's only gonna take 30 seconds or a minute to try again. Most of what I've talked about so far kind of just boils down to practice gesture drawing, but I also have some other miscellaneous advice. One of which is a principle I heard that I think Marvel Comics artists use, and it's that whatever your character is doing, you should show them at the most extreme point of that action. For example, if they're kicking something, the point at which their foot is first making contact with the thing they're kicking probably won't be the most extreme. What's better is showing them at the peak of their winding up, or just after they kicked and following through. On a similar note, if something in your image has weight to it, try exaggerating it. Maybe they're lifting a box or pulling on a rope, but whatever force they're fighting against will impact the gesture and the line of action. So yeah, try experimenting with how exaggerated that is. Silhouette or negative space is also something to be mindful of. The two things are kind of interlinked. The idea is, like, if your character was completely filled in with one color, could you still understand what they're doing? For example, if they're holding something and you want that to be the focus, you can make that object stick out in the silhouette. Yeah, having a strong silhouette or strong negative space means that at a very quick glance you can tell what's going on. Now, if you're feeling a little confident with proportions, or hell, even if you're not, maybe you just feel like doing something that's outside of your comfort zone, but either way, foreshortening can be used to exaggerate your character's pose. Like if someone is running towards the viewer, you can really make the leg and foot feel like it's coming at you, obviously just by, increasing its size. Yeah, I would recommend trying to make this really intense, because drawing exaggerated stuff's fun. But also, if it's too intense, it's pretty easy to just dial it back again. You find the sweet spot of intensity that you want, rather than just, going with whatever first gets put on paper. And also a quick note, if you do have a limb or something that's coming towards the viewer, hinting at very intense foreshortening, make sure the foreshortening is consistent so having things that are further back be smaller as well. Also, just another little quick tip, if you want to have a sense of action or motion in your image, but you want a pretty still pose, a way you can add some motion is just by having some wind, or I guess implied wind. Yeah, you want to make sure it's consistent, but yeah, sometimes you don't even need a flashy pose, sometimes just having like a character with wind in their hair or in their cape just makes an image interesting enough on its own. So yeah, those are some things I wanted to share about posing. Overall, if you still have no idea where to start when it comes to drawing a character in a pose, starting with finding a reference photo. Even if you do have an idea of the pose, just trying to find a reference, because there's always little details about something that you'd never imagine, but are very clear to see when there's a photo of it. If you have a very specific pose in mind, by the way, just like taking an awkward photo of yourself can also help. Yeah, it's actually what I did for this piece. Yeah, so that's the video. I hope that helped. Yeah, I hope whatever you're drawing is going well, and I'll see you later.